So that was a clip of the Studio 1.6 demo song, which I had the pleasure of making this time around. If you haven't seen my previous video, I did a little video talking about the creation of the song, kind of how that went, some background on it, which could give you a good idea of what's going on here. As well, I play the entire song in that one, so it's worth checking out if you haven't heard that yet. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down the musical aspects of this first section of the song, the kind of pop, disco-y kind of part that we just listened to. And in a follow-up video, we're gonna look at the mixing elements. If you have Studio 1.6, of course, you can actually download this session and explore it on your own. We're gonna look at these elements one by one, and we're gonna start off with drums. So first, I think let's just take a listen to the track with no vocals. It's kind of interesting, and we can just see what all the instruments sound like in this kind of pop disco section here. So focusing in on the drums, let's take a look. So this is all the drum tracks for this section here. Basically, we've got a sampler, Impact in this case, running a bunch of samples that I've taken from various PreSonus libraries available through PreSonus. I've taken a lot of the sounds and work with them quite a bit in terms of shaping the sample, layering them, processing them. We're going to look at that in the next video, but here's just a little taste of all the sounds individually. Kick, main snare, ghost snare, which is made from the main snare for doing ghost notes, side stick, two claps that are round robining through a bunch of, or I should say randomly playing a bunch of samples and they're panned, a bunch of closed hats, some kind of various open hats, tambourine, secondary snare sounds, toms, and then some other stuff that is used in the intro, a different set of sounds. So we just want to solo these drums first. I write everything in either playing it with my fingers, like on the keyboard, or usually, and then coming into the piano roll like this. So the pattern is pretty simple. Here's what it sounds like on its own. So really basic, just snare 2 and 4, a repeating kick pattern, and then alternating 2 hi-hat samples. I don't want to use the same one for both to get a more realistic sound. I'm using one sample and another one, and then the other one is playing lighter, right? So it's heavy, soft, heavy, soft, heavy, soft in an 8th note pattern, throwing in some open hi-hats for kind of a breath every once in a while, right, at the end of a pattern or somewhere. So then at the end of each kind of chunk, we've got 8 bars. We've got some extra kicks that come in, which I kind of feel are maybe part of the drum fill, you could say, or anticipating the drum fill. You hear a couple extra kicks, and you say, ooh, what's going on here? And the toms just come in. So this pattern kind of just loops, right, through this main section, even going into the post-chorus section. It's still the same, but what's different is the other elements that come in on top of it. So from the beginning, though, of this part, we've got this tambourine. This is actually a loop that I found in the PreSonus library. And so that is playing over top of the original drums. The point is just to give more rhythmic forward motion. The drums have an 8th note division, tut, 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 tut. These have 16 divisions, teka, 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 right? And then the next element that kind of comes in is this ride cymbal, and it's got emphasis on the quarters. However, if you listen close, ta 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 ta, but really I put it there for the quarters. So I'm thinking of 8s on the hi-hat, 16s on the tams, and then quarter notes on the ride, you could say. The crash here is done in audio, it's not done in MIDI. I'm often doing it in MIDI. In this case, I just felt like I wanted to work with it in audio for ease of shaping it, basically. The only other thing going on in the drums is this snare pop, which on its own sounds like this. Kind of like an EDM inspired thing. So this works with the drum fills on the first fill when the chorus comes in, you could say. So we've got this start of the first 4 bars. And it fills in a gap in the vocal. If we unmute the vocal here. All right, so it's just a simple little fill, but it rings out. That's kind of the idea. So here's this kind of like electronic almost intro.
All the stars are twinkling in tempo. The moon is ours to share, singing to us softly like an echo.
Okay, so let's quickly go over what's going on here. This is written in the same drum kit as the main pop kit, but with its own set of samples, kind of processed differently. And it's pretty simple though, right? There's kind of just the main. Some effects there on the hi-hat to get some trippy kind of delay effects happening. In this section, I found this little loop, sounds like this. It's just cool. Adding kind of an atmosphere. For the build-up, the ride cymbal from the chorus starts coming in along with a noise sweep. Nothing crazy though. And then this is the main chorus snare that comes in right before to be like, hey, now the snare is fat. So now we'll take a look at my favorite part, harmony, chords. In Studio One, you can open up the chord track. And in this case, I have populated it with all of the chord names. Now, the main heavy lifting of the harmony is done by 2 instruments layered. One is this piano sound. It's mainly there for transients, bang, you know, it really smacks. And then on top of it is this synth layer, which sounds like this. And together. On top of that, we've got these little funk guitar chords. In the original session, when I was first writing this, I just wrote these on piano with a kind of fake guitar sound. And even though I'm a guitar player, it was just faster for me to get it down that way and just to see, is this gonna fit? Because these little things, as you can hear, the harmony is changing a lot. There's a lot of dense chords here, right? These little funk chords, it's not as easy as when the harmony is just E7 for like 16 bars, you know, in funk. It's a lot of changing. So these little triads, you could say, need to fit over top of the changing harmony. So they're written melody first, just the top line of each chord is written first to make sure that feels good and it works with the main melody. And then I'm harmonizing in 2 parts underneath that, so 3 parts in total. So these are 3 notes in these chords. And then just finding rhythms that work with the drums, work with the melody, are not stepping on anybody's toes, have their own space. That's kind of how that came about. Now, as far as the actual chord progression is concerned, we can dig into it a little bit here. So here's the MIDI for this, and we can actually open up the chord track here as well. So something that features prominently in this track and in a lot of the music that I make is chords with no thirds. Or sus chords or slash chords or however you want to talk about that. There's lots of ways to look at it. Like this first chord here is this F, I would call basically F9 sus or F11 if you want to say F9 sus 4. No third in it. Then this moves up to an inverted E flat major 7 over G. So I'm thinking about bass line here. And this was all done against the melody. So I originally looped the melody, which we can probably even do that so you can just hear how it goes together. Here's just the lead vocal melody with these 2 instruments going.
Don't be shy, go on it. Feel the rhythm of the night, the rhythm of the night.
So every chord is purposefully chosen to fit with the melody, of course. So I'm playing the melody on the keyboard, or singing the melody, and I'm aware of what degrees, the scale degrees, the melody is hitting, and how these chords fit underneath it. Because of course, when the harmony is this dense and changing this often, you can't just slap it together and say, yeah, probably a bunch of 7th and 9th chords and it's just gonna work, right? You're gonna hit all sorts of issues by doing that. Issues that are not just notes that are clashing between the melodies, say like the melody is hitting the 3rd of the chord and I'm hitting the 9th of the chord at the same time. That can cause some kind of confusing problem at the top end there. That's one kind of problem. But another problem is that this melody was originally written to another beat, right? That original beat was like this.
Don't be shy, go on and feel the rhythm of the night, the rhythm of the night.
And it's a very different chord progression than what I've got here. Mine is inspired by it, but of course has a lot more going on. But her melody, of course, is going to be formed to and outlining that original progression. So if I just start slapping in some random like fat chords here and there, it's not going to work, not just because of notes clashing, but because of the functional movement of the chords. Her melody is designed to work with the flow of the original progression. And if I don't match that flow in some way, it's gonna feel like these things are working against one another. So the process is not one that is quick, I would say, though that's all the fun for me. I love doing it. That's my favorite part of this whole thing, is writing the harmony, you can probably tell. So taking a look at this, we have this F11 or F9 sus chord, no 3rd, going into 1st inversion E major 7, which is on its way to the A flat, this is the chord, A flat 6, 9, no 3rd, or A flat 6 sus 2, whatever you want to call that. So already 2 chords with no 3rds in them. Then we're moving up to this B flat chord, which at first also has no 3rd, and then it reveals the 3rd. But the 11 stays put, so it rubs. Right, and at the top of the chord, we have 3 notes all together. Just love that sound. And then a kind of similar move in the next chord, which is the C, and it starts also with no 3rd. And this 9th at the top kind of splits. It's a D, and then it splits to C and E flat. Right, like this. That's the first progression. The F, up to the A flat, the 2 B flat variations, and then the 2 C variations, whatever that was. The second time, I'm not content to just loop a progression. Second time starts the same. Instead of going to the inverted E flat chord, it goes to a root position E flat chord. So now the bass line's going down instead of up. And then instead of this A flat chord, which we had this A flat 6 sus chord before, now we get this non-diatonic D flat major 9. So in my mind, we're in the key of C minor here. You can think about it the key of E flat if you want. I'm gonna call it C minor. This is a flat 2 chord. And this is put here because it works with the melody. Here it is, comes in right here.
Let your heartbeat sync up.
Sing. Right. And then we've got this brief little, you can hardly even hear it, A flat major 9 over C. The reason this is there is because this D flat chord needs to make its way to this B flat chord, which is the same as it was over here, B flat major thing. And to get there, I wanted to walk the bass line down, D flat, C, B flat. And I'm not content to just play a note and not harmonize it. So it's D flat major 9 to not a C minor chord, but an A flat over C chord coming down into the B flat thing. This is the same as it was before. And then here, instead of resolving to the C minor chord like we did the first time, we resolve to the relative major, which is the E flat now. So this is E flat, major 9, to E flat, add 9 over G, which is designed to kind of move back into the F again at the start of the progression. So that's the main progression that goes through the chorus. Now, twice in this song, when the chorus comes, she has this run. And whenever I hear a run of notes on quarter notes, I need to harmonize every note. This is the first version of that.
No, it's something you can't fight. Don't be shy, go on it.
So I actually didn't write this version first. It's besides the point. So how this is written is getting the descending melody down on the keyboard first, thinking about where we're going, which is this F9 sus chord over here that has been the start of the progression every time so far, and thinking, okay, how do we get to that, like basically working backwards, while still harmonizing with this? And there's lots of ways to go about this. Often I'm thinking about bass motion, trying to create some kind of interesting bass motion against the melodic motion. If the melodic motion is descending, bass motion should be ascending, or at least not descending with it, doing something more interesting than that. Often that's what I'm trying to do. So here we ended up with these chords, F minor 7 at 11 to a C minor 7, A flat over D flat, E flat 6, sounds like. So we drop down, this is diatonic, this is diatonic, this is non-diatonic, and then back to being diatonic again. So one kind of modal chord, and the rest are in key. So this one is the less out of the two progressions that appear in this song, but I love the sound. It has a serious feel to me. I don't know why. That kind of harmony feels like, yeah. Kind of serious. It's not playful. I don't know why. Here's the second time that melody run happens.
No, it's something you can't fight.
This one's wackier, and now we ascended on the first one, got to descend on this one.
No, it's something you can't fight.
So A flat major 9, we're in key. G minor 7 at 11, yeah, we're in key. G flat major 9, we're not in key. C7, we're not in key. C7 is the 5 chord of where we're going, which is F, that's why it's there. So this has a bit of a hipper feel, chromatic bass line, of course, walking down, and then it's got the major 5 chord. It's not even actually the 5 chord of the key, but the secondary dominant going towards F, which is the start of the progression. It actually has the melody on top. Now in the post-chorus, we have one change. It's the same progression as earlier, except instead of going C minor 7 sus to C minor 7, we go C minor 7 sus to C7 major. This is because later in the song, during the R&B section, we have this happen. We have this C major suddenly appear, and I love the sound of it. And I thought, can we kind of foreshadow that by bringing it in earlier in the track? So normally, of course, her vocal every time ends with
The rhythm of the night, and it goes
rhythm of the night.
rhythm of the night,
But here,
of the night.
rhythm of the night. Now, that's not in the original vocal. I actually had to go in and tune that. I so badly wanted this to happen that I actually went in and melodined her original vocal to make it happen. I also had to melodyne the harmonies and everything because it's just the way I am. I can't do anything else. So overall, we get this.
Dum da 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 dum da dum dum da 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 dum da dum. Rhythm of the night, the rhythm of the night, and it goes like dum da 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 dum da dum dum.
So I think this gives a great contrast. We've heard the minor over and over and over and over, and then suddenly, just for these two, it goes major. It feels like, ooh, this is nice. So that was the thought process behind that. The only other thing of harmonic relevance that happens here is when we come into the post-chorus, the chords are doubled by this synth pad. So they're not stabbing anymore, and the sound is very thick and present. It's wide and it's sustaining. This is to differentiate this section from the main chorus section. So you feel like the main chorus section is kind of stabby and spacious, has a lot of gaps in it. And then suddenly this comes in to be boom, we're holding now. The whole thing is holding. Actually, the string part below also holds. So all together, we get this change from here.
Wanna feel the rhythm of the night, the
have this main synth pad. And kind of another take on the same original basic chord progression, because in the demo that I was originally given, there was one chord progression for the entire track. Well, except for the R&B section. And so this is, again, taking that original idea, and I was sticking a little bit closer to what the original was, but making some changes. Here, we've got this A flat major 7 going into C minor 11, B flat. This is all kind of standard in the key. And then the F now is major. Later in the song, the C becomes major. So it's a similar sort of feel, but it's on a different chord in the key, which I feel like is kind of a nice change. Right after that, it just literally goes up an octave, and I drop the roots out. So no more root notes in the chords, at least not in the bass octave. LFO on it. And this little last part changes as a means of basically just getting us ready for the main section coming up, the chorus section. On top of these synth chords, we have these guitars, which sound pretty cool, like this. So what's going on here is I've got two guitars run through a big reverb and a chorus and all this, playing the same chords but different voicings, one lower, one higher, pan side to side. They're just atmospherically ringing out, right? To give more context. You don't want to just keep it so simple as just the synth pad. We're kind of world building, we're creating a kind of atmosphere that is more enveloping, and that's what the function of these is, at least in this first section. Then I bounce those out together into a single track, pitch that up an octave, and that slowly fades in over time to kind of like increase the interest. It sounds like this as it comes in. It's got some artifacts in it, but I kind of like the artifacts in this case. It adds some interest. Then all of that stops when we drop into the next section where the bass comes in. The bass is just playing roots.
Let's let go of all that brought us low. The shadows dancing slow and
so all these guitars and the kind of thick synth pad all come to an end, relatively speaking, when we repeat this verse going into the pre-chorus. In the pre-chorus, like I said, the chords go up an octave, so they lose a lot of body and they go up higher. These atmospheric guitars, they go away too. And with all of that dropped out, these new chords come in. It's actually the same chords in the same octave as it was, but now they're just bright and stabby. They sound like this. So the idea here is building a whole little atmosphere in the first section and then throwing it all away and basically doing the same thing with new instruments. So that original one goes up, the guitars are gone, a new sound comes in, the harmony is still the same, the voicings are still the same, basically the drum beat's all the same, everything's the same, but it sounds different because different instruments are playing it. So one of the new features in Studio 1.6 is a vocoder, and I wanted to get that in somewhere, and here we've got this line,
vibing on the right frequency,
which is the last line before the chorus, so that seems like a good place to put it. So here's the sound.
Vibing on the right frequency.
Without the original vocal.
Vibing on the right frequency.
This is just a Mai Tai saw wave, straight up, two of them in 2 octaves, playing the chords that the synth is playing, but big, fat versions of them, and the melody on top. This is the melody.
Vibing on the right frequency.
Now, if you're anything like me, and hopefully you are, you're obsessed with bass. I'm obsessed with bass. I'm super obsessed with bass. I took it up late in life, though I do love to play. In this case, what happened was I wrote the bass line actually initially using the keyboard and a kind of MIDI bass sound just as a placeholder. And I was practicing this on my real bass over and over and over, trying to like really get it down, really get it tight. And then one of the people that I was in contact with who works at PreSonus, his name is Perry T. I'll link him in the description. He actually mentioned to me, hey, you know what? I play bass and maybe I could play that for you. He sent me some videos. I thought, yes, you can. So that's what happened. He sent me a raw bass track. I stuck it in, processed it, worked with it a little bit, and that's what we ended up with here. So this is actually a real bass, not played by me. So I love this kind of line. I love this kind of funk, gospel influenced, really tight, techie, stuff's bouncing around, whatever, you know, that's big for me. So he did a great job playing it, flat wound strings, got this kind of like rounded tone to it. And I think it just sits in with the drums really well. I'll play now with the whole track here. And if you just focus your ears on this. And there's not much to talk about there. I mean, I've got some videos already. If you want to check them out, I'll put them in the description too. So many videos in the description. Some videos on writing bass lines, and in particular, the third in that series, kind of writing advanced bass lines, techniques for writing advanced bass lines, will cover a lot of this kind of stuff. There's just a lot of, you know, normal stuff, roots and fifths and octaves and some thirds, some runs put in there and whatever. But generally, this starts by me having no bass, playing the song, and just vocalizing, going. I don't even know like what those notes are going to be at the time. Clearly, I'm not actually singing distinct pitches. I'm just vocalizing a groove, a rhythm, a vibe that I want. And then I probably will record my actual vocal. And then when I have a good feel of it and I really like what I sung, I go in and I start putting notes to it. I start trying to figure out how do I piece this together in a meaningful way. So I'm doing that in MIDI. I could do it on the real bass too, but in this case it was done on the keyboard. And then, like I said, I was gonna play it. He ended up playing it. Sounds amazing. It's just for this section. It's not like the whole song is played with a real electric bass. There's synth basses in the rest of it. But in this pop disco section, it's real electric bass. Here's the waveform. That's what's going on there. Thank you, Perry. Really appreciate that. You did a great job. It came out awesome. The bass is just playing roots of the chords, but it's got pitch bend wherever it felt good. Finding any little way possible to modulate, to change, to move, to find interest, to create a more organic feel in every sound all the time. I mean, that's the thing when you're working with electronic sounds, is either you're going to go for that hyper electronic, nearly robotic type of sound, or you find every way you can to modulate and wiggle stuff. And if you start wiggling everything, the whole electronic vibe becomes much more organic and kind of lifelike versus a kind of sterile, saw wavy type vibe. We also got these growls in the bass. That. These were just created through a kind of neuro bass process, as it's called, taking a simple sound, just mangling it with distortion, bouncing that out, pulling it into a sampler, mangling it again with phasers and all sorts of stuff, bouncing that out, pulling it into a sampler again, and then kind of doing whatever you want with it. So that now has been bounced out. I just chopped up a couple little notes that go just to pull us into the main bass, which goes here. And it's just to create some something, you know? It's almost like a fill, like a bass fill. At the end of it, each section we get this just ripping sound that then becomes soft again. Moving on to melody, there's just a couple melodic elements here in this main section. The first is this counter melody that sounds like this. That's the first one. So this works with the vocal, which goes like this.
Feel the rhythm of the night, rhythm of the night. Let your heartbeat sync up with the rhythm of the night, rhythm of the night, and it goes like.
It's running through while the vocal's still going. You know, it's a little bit stepping on the vocal's toes, you could say, but I'm trying to sustain notes when she's changing, change notes when she's sustaining, and then finding kind of a harmony of a sort with what she's singing. Now in the post-chorus, I had to do this, I just had to do it. Because I had the disco thing in mind, I thought, okay, disco, what's disco? Well, we gotta get the strings involved. So this is a just legato kind of string patch from a Presonus instrument in Presence. It's not the greatest sounding thing in the world, but in the whole mix, I feel like, you know, you probably don't even notice it that much, but.
And it goes like dum da 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 dum da dum dum da 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 dum da dum rhythm of the night, rhythm of the night, and it goes like dum da.
And it just adds a bit of a sustaining thing, right? That's the whole vibe of this post-chorus. Now we are sustaining. We're sustaining low with the chords, we're sustaining high with the strings are descending while the chords are ascending, and then this string melody ends up hitting the operative tone on the C7, which is the E natural. We were playing C minor before, E flat, goes to C7. Now the second time that post-chorus comes around, we drop the vocals out and guitar solo comes in. So here's that part. So this is a solo that I played, and there's some harmonies to it as well. I took some time to write this. This is not improvised. Don't think it's improvised. This is me sitting down, looping the thing over and over and over again, vocalizing, trying to find a good feel, and then figuring out where I want to put everything. So yeah, I'm outlining the chords, blah, blah, blah. It could do a whole thing on just writing a solo. We're not going to get into how it's written right now, but it's there. There's also these harmony parts. So satisfying. This part has an octave played above it. I just felt like it was sounding too dull for some reason in this section, so I just subtly put an octave. We have this synth accent, which
In the air.
is actually playing the same note that she's singing, although it's also harmonized and has an LFO and a reverb and whatever. It's just to emphasize this
In
moment.
the air. All the stars are twinkling.
And then it doesn't do
in a
anything else until it happens
dimple.
again.
Can you see it? The moon is ours to share. Sing.
In the background there, you could hear these little twinkle bells, and they're just kind of dancing.
Tempo. Can you see it? The moon is ours to share. Sing.
Later, the twinkle bells are duplicating the melody.
Let's let go of all that brought us slow. The shadows dancing slow, and so are we. The energy's on beat. It's clear that you and me are.
Because the chord here is so interesting, the F major chord instead of F minor, I wanted to do something in the bells to accent it in the space given by the melody.
And so are we. The energy's on beat.
The other melodic element here is this synth arp, which, let me get rid of the vocals again. Just a kind of simple thing, creating some background interest as its filter opens and closes, right? As I'm often talking about, trying to find ways to not just be so obvious with everything, saying, these are the chords, this is the melody, that is the bass, you know? We find little elements that are, we have the little twinkle bells going on, we have the stabby chords, the sustaining, wiggling chords, we've got this thing subtly going in the back, this guitar part starts fading in over time. You're creating a whole world, you're creating a whole atmosphere that the listener probably isn't going to notice like any of that actually in a way that they would say, oh, there is that thing. They're just listening to the vocal probably, maybe the drums or something. But without it, it's not the same, right? So you want to build a whole world. I want to build a whole world anyway. That's what I like doing. So that's all the musical elements for this first disco pop section of the track. If you want to learn more about how I think about these kinds of things, you can check out some courses I have in the description of this video. I've also got a link to a Discord community that I've got there. We talk about music production and synth creation and music theory and everything music in there. Would love to have you there and join the discussion. In the upcoming videos, I'll be breaking down the mixing of this whole section as well as the music and mixing of the next two sections in future videos. So stay tuned for those. Please subscribe to the channel and leave the video a like if you liked it. Hope you have a good rest of your day and hope this was helpful for you. See you soon.